All right, the screen's talking to me. I'm Allie, I'm an alcoholic. And I just want to take a collective deep breath because that was a lot of announcements. And I'm like literally sitting here shaking. I haven't spoken on Zoom in a while. I've been, so happy that I've been speaking in person and like being with you guys in person, which has been amazing. So I'm just and I just ask my higher power to set aside everything I think I know about this thing that I'm in love with called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and set aside everything I think I know about my own journey and my program and my steps, because I can intellectually understand the book all day long. I can go to all these big book studies. I can listen to Joe and Charlie till I'm blue in the face. I can quote it chapter and verse, but that's not what causes me to have a psychic change. What causes me, this suffering alcoholic, to have a soulful experience is when I come from the heart and I get, I can get really trapped in the mechanics of the big book. And I have to be careful with that as well, because that's one of my defects of character, is I can use it to be, judgy in meetings. And I was definitely guilty of that in my first few years. My sobriety date is October 20th of 2009. And that took me roughly 15 years to get, because of this intellectual ego that I have that convinced me that I somehow was not one of you, and I was not an alcoholic, and that I was different than everybody else. But before I even get into that, I mean, I know that we've all been so blessed with the fellowship of the Spirit. And these past 2 years, I just want to thank Ali, my brother from another mother on Zoom, my Zoom brother for another mother. It's interesting how we're in this 2D reality, and my physical program, just like all of us, has changed so much with the pandemic. I moved 3 times during COVID, and some of that was self-will, which I thought was God inspired. Thank you, 11th step in the big book, for that little warning. But because of that, my physical program really has changed. And I think that we could all attest to that. Instead of greeting people in person and being with you, I'm greeting newcomers in boxes. And speaking on Zoom or doing service is very different when it's on a screen versus being in person, just trying to be a humble servant. I recently started greeting at a meeting here in New York City, and it's like, that's the first position I ever had in AA. And it's so amazing to just, hello, how are you doing in person? And you see the newcomers shaking versus, on Zoom, you can't really see that stuff. You can't really tell, who's really, still in that darkness. And because of the fellowship of the Spirit, tuning in on Tuesday nights, up on a Tuesday, that's what I always like to say, and hearing these amazing messages, it shows me that the fellowship of the Spirit still works, even through technology, even through the screen, making connections with people that are my strangers, that are strangers like Ali, but because we've been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence, the likes of which we never deemed possible. And I get to come in here in this little weird Zoom reality and hear these amazing messengers that are students of the literature, just like I am, that have had a psychic change, that have been recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. I still get fed. I still get it still works in and through us 24 hours a day, just like we talk about in the literature. And so I just want to thank everybody that puts this thing on. I really don't know what I'm doing here today. These speakers on here are spiritual teachers for me, and it takes a village. It definitely took a village to help me get my 12 years of sobriety. It wasn't just my sponsor. It was, I got sober in South Florida, and it was going to conferences and chasing the message, because I need that. And, for the love of the big book, what a topic. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't really know a whole lot of people here in New York yet. So I was like, who told them that I'm such a nerd for this thing, and that I'm so obsessed with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that I had a big book home group for years. And I'm a book person anyway, but if you're new, and even if you're not new, I just want to start out by saying, I did not always feel this way about the big book. I, went to rehab straight from psych ward. They said that I was never going to be able to be allowed in society ever again without a case manager because of my alcoholic induced psychosis. And when I first read the big book in rehab by myself without a sponsor, because I didn't need a sponsor back then because I knew everything, right? This is my ego. I thought it was very poorly written. I thought it really needed, to be edited, and, and I'm a book snob anyway. So like, for me, I was like, this is like the equivalent of self-publishing on Amazon. Like, they clearly didn't have an agent when they wrote this. This whole thing needs to be redone. It's terrible. Like, I didn't know, I had no idea that this book is actually a spiritual textbook. Its main purpose is to enable me to find a relationship with a power greater myself that's going to solve not just my drink problem, that's step one stuff, right? But all my problems. My first year, it's the drink problem. But then from that, because the 12 steps, how they're laid out, talking about a treasure map. What is the treasure map? It's to get me right with myself. It's to get me right with you. And it's to get me right with God. And if you follow the directions as they're laid out in the book, you might become a militant, conformist the way that I was in my first few years, but I needed that. I needed that structure. I needed that discipline. I would go to my home group every Wednesday night. It was set up, straight from Joe and Charlie inspired classroom style. We went through the book line by line. We answered questions, and we used a microphone, and we spoke out loud about what does this word mean, and what does that word mean, and how come it says this exactly and precisely, and you got to find it next, and we're going to launch, and we got all this language and stuff, and I like really like when I went through it like that, and with a sponsor, and after being surrendered, I understood that this really cool thing would happen where I would go to my home group. I've read this book 1,000 times, and I've taken women through the work, but it would change. I would be like, oh my God, how did that get in there? Where did this come from? Oh, I would have these little aha moments when I would read the book. And why is that? Because this book is not just black and white for me. I have to live it. I have to live what this book is talking about. So for me, it's not about worshiping the big book. It's not about worshiping the speakers. It's not about worshiping any of that. It's pointing me what I'm supposed to worship. It's the source that leads to the source for me. And I have to remember that I'm not worshiping this. I'm not worshiping you. I'm becoming dependent on God. Absolutely. I'm becoming ready to at last abandon myself utterly to him. They're powerful words, but it's just my belief. And this is just my experience. I really believe that Bill was in his sleazy stockbrokenness, stealing from Lois's, slender purse. He was so broken the way that I was so broken, and he cried out for help. He saw that at last he needed to have his friend with him. He abandons himself utterly. And then what does he say? He says, and then so he came, and he is capitalized because we're talking about this divine power that's going to save our life. The grace that's readily abundant, that's readily available to all of us if we just tune in, forget everything we think we know, surrender, ask for help, and go through the work as it's laid out. And I'm so grateful that I had good teachers with this thing, as my friend Keith always says, because without that, I would be dead. I don't understand, and it's just me. I'm very mentally ill. Okay. Bill calls us mentally ill a lot in the beginning. And I used to love taking newcomers through the work. Cause I'd be like, just be prepared. You're crazy. It's okay. Welcome. We have a solution for that. But Bill's going to call us mental defectives and all this, language we get from even Dr. Silky in there. And yeah, I'm still mentally ill on a daily basis. I could still be broken and suffering. I can still have steps 6 and 7 problems. But today I have steps 10 and 11 solutions. Today, I get the ultimate solution, which is step 12, being able to carry the message. And I don't do it perfectly. Being able to get outside of myself and help somebody else, because that is what keeps me from getting stuck in the opposite of the treasure map, getting stuck in a self-imposed prison, which is my disease. Which is my disease. My disease is this cave of selfishness where I lived my whole entire life before I was brought to Alcoholics Anonymous and literally given the gift to find the spirit within me. That is a gift. It is a get to today for me to show up for the thing that saved my life. It's not a have to. Did I not want to do it all week? Yes. Was I hoping that it was just a fluke and Ollie hadn't texted me? I was like, good, he found somebody else, until I get a text at 11:30 at night. And I'm like, what time is it in Toronto? Oh my goodness. And I was like, okay, fine. But it's okay, because I could sit here and tell you that I know what I'm going to, I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm going to say something today that I didn't plan, that I'm not even going to be aware of what I said. And somebody's going to text me later and be like, thank you so much about, for sharing about strawberry cupcakes. And that's what they needed to hear, to get them right with God. That's what they needed to hear, to help them get outside of themselves, whatever, to fix that little piece inside of them that might've felt off. And I'm going to say, wow, that wasn't me that shared that, but okay, you're welcome. So this has very little to do with me. I want to back up a little bit because I am really excited and I've had a lot of coffee and that's still my only addiction and I'm sticking to it. I'm not going to let go of that coffee addiction. I'm sorry, but I'm just, yeah, no, you can't have this one, God. Not giving up that defect. Sorry. But I want to back up and just say that this is a very serious business for me. When I say that I would be dead without the 12 steps, I'm talking about physically, yes. Okay. For me to drink is to die. When I'm shut off from the sunlight of the spirit, like we talked about in the 4th step, the insanity of alcohol returns for me and I die. For me to drink is to die. But further on down the road, after the drink problem gets removed, after those 10-step promises come true for me, what does that mean? It means that the road gets more narrow and it means that I can die spiritually. And that is a very dangerous place for me to be. I know a lot of people that maybe they don't drink after 10, 15 years of sobriety, but they want to kill themselves. And I know people that that's happened to. And that's part of this alcoholism that I have. It's part of my mental illness that I could be, Bill suffered from it, this hopeless depression. When I started drinking, when I found this spirit called alcohol, which was the wrong spirit, it was the wrong spirit. But when I found it, it fixed this internal condition that I had. I moved 17 times in 12 years growing up. I was always the new girl. I was alone a lot. I didn't like people. I hated people. I was afraid of people. My father left when I was 9 years old and I never heard from him again. And I didn't realize that that meant that I was going to develop this thing called self-hatred where I was going to blame myself for that. I started drinking because I didn't have another solution. If I wasn't going to drink, I was going to kill myself. And that's just what it was for me. And then there became my love affair. My love-hate affair with alcohol took me to crazy, scary places. I had the obsession of the mind so powerful that I couldn't go to bed without a bottle of pop-off vodka being arm's reach from me. And I had to have a pack of Newports at all times as well. And I, did horrible things. I sank to the depths of loneliness and despair. I experienced quicksand. Physically, I got kicked out of the same university twice. I had a lot of really deep, dark, depressive moments. My disease led me to insanity. I was in a lot of psych wards. I wore that as a badge of honor because somehow I thought this meant that I was different. And I'll show you, I'll just go get, they said that I was like a sociopath. And I was like, ooh, that's so cool. Like, that explains why I'm not like the rest of you people. I really just felt like an alien. I really felt like, and I had this idea of a spirit of the universe, creative intelligence, whatever that is, but it wasn't inside of me. It was like somewhere out there. And I didn't know that, that I had the ability to turn to that power and to invite that power in and to help me with I didn't know any of that. And I just thought that I was all alone in this world and all alone in this life. Coming to believe in a power greater than myself started when I started drinking, and I didn't even know it. When I started drinking and I was hanging out with the bad kids, I got good grades in school, and that was not a problem for me. But I didn't relate to anybody in school because they didn't have what I had. The people I related to got kicked out of school. They were like the bad kids. They were the dropouts. They were the druggies. They were the throwaways, and they could drink the way I did. We used to have these bonfires in the woods. This is back when it was still fun. And I never went home because it was funner to just stay outside and drink all night and do other things. And there was always this quiet, still voice in me that knew when I would come to in the morning with the world's most horrific hangovers. There was a little thing inside of me that would whisper and it would say, one day you're going to stop doing this. This is not what I have for you. And I'm the only alcoholic in my family. I didn't grow up with that. I didn't grow up seeing it. I had no idea. I had no idea of what an alcoholic was. I just thought I was drinking because I was some tortured soul artist that was completely misunderstood. And I latched on to people that were dead, like Sigmund Freud, who did a lot of a certain substance, and Edgar Allan Poe and Vincent van Gogh. And I'm like, oh, Bill calls it his intellectual heroes. I had those. I was like, oh, this is why I drink this way. But I always knew. And so for me, that was that hope that was buried beneath all the things I uncover in my 4-step, that little glimmer, that little spark. And by God's grace, I didn't die out there. despite the overdoses, despite all the homelessness and everything that I went through, it is an absolute miracle that I'm still here. And so when I went to my rehab, I only went to one. I should have gone to more, but I only went to one. Um, I read the book. This is still the same big book that I have from rehab. It was given to me by it was left on the bed by somebody named Lucy. It doesn't leave my apartment because it's completely fallen apart, which I'm told is a good thing. I'm not going to get that rebound because I want people to know that I actually read the book and I'm obsessed with it, and that's fine. But it was left on a bed and I read the whole thing. And like I told you, I thought it should be, re-edited. And who's their agent? This is terrible. I did my 4-step by myself. I didn't call it my 4-step. I called it Hollywood's best-selling memoir because I thought that was going to be a thing. I'd be able to market it to Hollywood. My ego, again, like here, before I went to rehab, I was in a state-run psychiatric facility eating prison food and being chased around by guards telling me it was time to take my Thorazine. And I think I'm going to, my memoir in rehab, 3 notebooks. Oh my goodness, it's my little novella and it's going to get made into a movie. I had no idea. So what happened was that little, power that started when I had started drinking for me inside, it started getting louder and louder. And when I was in this rehab, there was this brochure, and it was for a halfway house in Florida. And I just know that to be a miracle because when I left rehab, I don't stay sober from there. I had a real first step problem. Bill says being convinced. I wasn't convinced of anything. I was convinced that I was, going to try to learn how to drink normally. And I didn't really have a problem. And that's the insanity of my disease. It's despite all the evidence of my past, getting kicked out and overdosing and DUIs and all that stuff. I still think I can control and enjoy it, like we talk about in chapter 3. That's not me. That's not the real me thinking that. That's my diseased self thinking that. That is this internal thing that I have. So when I went down to Florida, AA was very different down there. And I got my first sponsor, and she said, and I didn't have a car, I didn't have a license, I didn't have anything. I didn't have $1 to my, I had a trash bag of some ratty old clothes that hadn't been washed in 3 months. That's all I had. I didn't have any, I had nothing. And she told me, she said, I'm going to pick you up at your halfway house, be outside Saturday morning at 8:15. And I was like, 8:15? Like, why can't you just round up? Like, of course I'm going to be late to that. What do you mean 8:15? But I was really, really sick and I was really scared. And I think, fear and pain is a great motivator. It really is. And I just did what she said. So she picks me up and she takes me to my first meeting, and it's called Sober Sisters in Boca Raton, Florida. And that meeting started at 8:45 in the morning. And I just remember my first impression of you guys, and I mean, not guys, it was all women, but alcoholics, I thought everybody was faking it. In my head, I judged it because everybody was so happy and it was Saturday morning. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't stand people. So my sponsor sees this and she's like, you're going to be a greeter. And I was like, no, I don't like women. I don't like people. I don't like groups. I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Oh my God, just let me sit in the back and continue to judge you. Let me sit in the back, continue to judge. And now there's a Lord's Prayer. There's a basket. I was like, this is all Christian and I'm Jewish. I never practiced it. And now I'm Jewish all of a sudden. I was like, I don't want to do any of this. But they saw that, these women that are so armed with the facts about themselves saw this in me, and they were like, they like set me up to do all this stuff that was eventually going to lead me to a path of uncovering all the things that had been blocking me from you all this time. My 3rd week of greeting, I actually started looking forward to it. People started knowing my name. And, my heart goes out to newcomers that get sober during COVID because, you don't really have that experience, but it's coming. I think we're at the end of this thing, please God. I really think that's definitely alive and well in New York. We're definitely back to meetings in person, which is great, and wearing our masks and doing all the things. But yeah, greeting people in person, I started looking forward to it. And all the while, my sponsor was this Joe and Charlie big book thumper. She gives me the CDs to listen to. And there was something about these 2 guys that led me down this path. Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed this path. The women in my home group, they weren't quoting the book chapter and verse, right? That came with my other home group. I had my big book study, but they had emotional sobriety. They were living life like a loose garment. Nothing was disturbing these women. And if it was, they were hiding it from me. They were walking around with this quiet serenity. And it was so damn attractive to me, attraction rather than promotion, that I just did what they said. Those women are still a part of the fabric of my existence. They're still in my life today. And without those women, without learning the mechanics of the book, coupled with that emotional sobriety, without God putting all these angels in my life, I just know that I wouldn't have had the foundation that I have today. So even though, in the 2 years I moved 3 times with COVID, my physical program has changed. My spirit has become more enriched because I've continued to travel down this path. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done some things over the past 2 years I'm not even proud of. I didn't even want to speak today because I was like, oh, that disease likes to tell me I have nothing to say. That disease likes to wake me up in the middle of the night and say, you're no good. It can still talk to me. I'm always going to have that. I'm going to have this brokenness always. But what do I choose to do with it today? That's why I need the power. That's why I need his loving sway, his loving presence to come in and fix me and get me right. It says in our literature, it says in the beginning of the 12 and 12, I think it's not in the big book, it's in 12 and 12. It says the 12 steps, if practiced as a way of life, enable the suffering alcoholic to become happily and usefully whole. That is what we all have here today. We have a design for living that works. And it also is hinting at the fact that at any given day, I might still be suffering with this thing. I'm not going to be rocketed 24 hours. That's insane. Who the heck is going around rocketed into fourth dimension existence? I wish I could. It feels good. I'm a feel-good junkie. I love feeling close to God. I love feeling close to you. But it's been a very isolating 2 years for a lot of us. And it has been a little bit of a struggle for me. And I did move to a brand new city. And yes, it was my dream to move to New York. But did I experience loneliness? Yes. Did I experience depression? Yes. Did I experience not wanting to get out of bed? Absolutely. All within the last year. And what do I get because of that? I get steps 10 and 11 telling me exactly what to do. Where am I selfish? Where am I dishonest? Where am I resentful? Where am I frightened? It's always frightened. Fear, 1,000 forms of fear, or fabric of existence is shot through with it. I still have that. But the more what does it say? It says something like, I surrender as much of myself to as much of God as I understand at that time. I think it's in Drop the Rock, right? I think it's in Drop the Rock. And that's true for me. That's definitely true for me, is that even though I have this pain and this suffering, and at any given point, I could say, maybe I can have a craft beer. This restless, irritable, and discontent is on me. I can go back to my foundation and surrender myself again to this power that I'm not even really 100% sure of, but I have experiences with it. I've had experiences with God in the past 12. I'm going to say I came into the program 15 years ago, so I'm going to include that as well, where I started reaching out and surrendering because I had this madness that was upon me. And because I've had experiences of surrendering and letting go and turning it over and getting the results of what that looks like, going back to school sober, and finishing and not getting kicked out, finishing my degree in 2 years. It didn't take me 10 years. I didn't have to not show up to class. I didn't have to steal my roommate's pills. I didn't do any of that. I actually went to class. I went every single class. It was a miracle. I got A's. I remembered things the teachers taught me. I actually applied what I learned, and then I graduated. And I remember when I graduated with my associate's degree, all my AA family came to support me. My family, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I got a 2-year degree from Palm Beach State College. And it was like, I think I was like 4 years sober. And it was like the greatest thing in the world, because all of that goes to him. All of that goes to you guys. I owe my life to this program. And then what do? Is I get this intuitive thought that I should become a teacher. So I do that and I become a teacher, and that was stressful. And then it was like, no, secretly I have this other thing that I want to pursue, and that's writing. So I start doing that, and I write for the Grapevine, and then I get published through there, and all these things start happening. And it's just because I keep continuing to surrender as much of myself to as much of God as I understand at the time. And that I have these, instances where it's not even an effort for me, it just comes. That is the miracle of it, as long as I keep in fit spiritual condition. When I'm in the middle of AA, when I'm doing service, when I'm with you and not with the world, it just comes. That's why I do this. I do this for two main reasons, because I need to get right with myself. I need to serve you. I need to get right with my higher power. I need to be with you, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's in Toronto, whether it's at a convention where I might go there and I might get COVID, because that happened in Jacksonville. And I'm so glad I didn't go there, although I really wanted to. but I need to continue to be in the fellowship of the Spirit, you know, the very name of this whole thing, because it helps me, it gives me a purpose, and it gives me strength, and it gives me joy. My joy doesn't come from the external stuff. It never has. You know, I remember my first few years, and I've been saying this to my sponsor a lot lately, like, I missed the first few years of my sobriety because I was just happy all the time for no good reason. I was like, oh my God, I didn't drink for 30 days. I'm taking the bus. I'm getting rained on, tropical rain showers in Florida. Things were so simple back then. And then I get stuff in sobriety and I get attached. I get attached to those things. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that none of this stuff, I have a new employer. I don't even work for this agency. I don't even do that. Like, I have a new employer. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Does my alcoholic ego start getting attached to the stuff? You know, the worldly clamors. Bill says it's soon blotted. He has this white light burning bush experience. And then he says it's soon blotted out by worldly clamors. And he goes through this depression afterwards. And I really, really relate to that. You know, I really, really relate to that. Some of the gifts of the past few years have been, you know, being that I've moved to New York, I've been able to get really close with my family again, because they're not that far from here. And when I was down in Florida, I didn't always get to come up here. You know, it was kind of a thing, and I have a hard time when I fly, and it's a whole thing. But practicing the principles in all my affairs, and going through, you know, the steps for me. So I'll just talk about this a little bit. The steps are layers. I have layers of self. I have layers of relating to God. I have layers of relating to myself. And the first time around with the work, it was really just to get me over my alcohol problem, and to get me to help introduce me on how to forgive myself and how to forgive you. Because if I forgive myself, then I can't be mad at you. I can't, if I'm not judging myself anymore, I'm not judging you anymore. And I did a lot of work with 6 and 7 in my first few years with all that stuff. As I go on and I go through the work with the process, you know, the treasure map for me leads me to a deeper understanding of who I am and of whose I am. You know, who do I belong to today? Who do we all belong to today? You know, who's going to call us home at the end of this thing? And that's a gift. That's a gift. That's a gift that I get to have that today, where even if that disease wakes me up in the middle of the night and I start, you know, I start feeling icky, because I felt icky. You know, I have had the ickies come back with COVID and all this stuff. And it's so much fear. There's so much chaos out there right now. But having the ability to turn back to the power within that's always rescued me, and knowing that what do I have to do that is get quiet, sit quiet when in doubt, you know, practice contact. Having conscious contact is in my mind, but it's really in my heart. It's really in my heart. And that's why, as much as I love the book, as much as I love the steps, as much as I love the directions, the clear-cut directions that are laid out in the book, it's not about the intellectual knowing of it for me. It's about carrying the message that the book leads me to, which is that I have an ability today, I am capable as one of God's kids to continue to surrender and ask for help. If I don't have 6 and 7 problems today, then there's really no motivating reason for me to continue to surrender as much as myself as I think I need to. If I'm just good, then I'm good. I surrender more to God when I'm in pain. I hope, you know, one day I get to that place where I'm just like, I just got a promotion. And although, you know, sometimes I do experience that. I mean, I definitely know where where the thanks goes to today. But what's interesting is, you know, talking about all this stuff is interesting, because I meet a lot of newcomers here in New York now, and they don't know, you know, they don't, they think the whole thing's about not drinking. And it's just not about that. We all get tricked. You know, it's so not about that. I feel like this is just my human brain trying to make sense of all this. I feel like God knew that in his infinite wisdom. He was like, you know, I'm going to choose the ones that are really badly beaten and mangled and broken to give this solution to. And that's the only way it's going to continue to work, is that by relating to other alcoholics that I need to give this away to, that's how this message is going to continue to feed me and live through me 24 hours a day. You know, I don't sponsor the way that I used to. I don't even have as many sponsees as I used to have. A tribe, and I had all these women, you know, following me around with their books and their highlighters. You have to do it this way, it has to be done. Just sit in your seat and don't text during the meeting and don't go to the bathroom and nobody wants to see you. Ugh. And now it's like, it's come as you are. I mean, we've been through COVID. Like if you're sober and you're getting sober during COVID, oh my goodness, like it's such a miracle. It's such a miracle. And it's because you're needed. I don't think you should sit on the work, but I've learned how to help, thank you, try to help people right where they're at. You know, I used to get really judgy, and that's not my job. You know, my real purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service to others. And the past 2 years, it hasn't always been an AA. It's been a lot of family stuff. You know, I've had a lot of tumultuous things with family, and learning more about myself with the steps have really shown me that the steps address my alcoholism, but they also address this old stuff from my childhood that as a woman, I don't know, maybe as a man, whatever, I really had to go further with that stuff. A lot, you know, the more I stay sober, the more I realize just how broken I am. Like I still had so much stuff from my past that was clogging me. And the more I started getting around my family, like these past 2 years, the more I had to really practice love and tolerance. You know, how can I forgive them? How can I forgive myself? And the result of it is I just celebrated a birthday. They wanted to have a birthday party for me, my family. I haven't celebrated an actual like belly button birthday with my family in, I don't know, like 10 years. My niece, who became my goddaughter because of the promises, because this is my family that pulled me out of the gutter in Atlantic City, homeless. And then I get sober and talk about testimony, you know, talk about this loving higher power. They asked me to be her godmother. They don't even believe in God. They're like, oh, be her godmother. And we're Jewish. Again, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I took it as a huge gift, and it really touches my heart even to this day. But I just got back from visiting them, and I'm telling you, it is such a miracle to be able to spend time with my family sober. And they got me all these little cards. My niece made me a cake with my grandmother's heart-shaped pans, and I got to make amends to my grandmother in sobriety. And it's just, it's so amazing that I'm able to get to come here and to do this, and that we're all here because we're seekers of this thing. And it's not enough for us to be told, just don't drink and go to meetings. That's not enough for us. I need more. I am an alcoholic. I need alcoholic sobriety. I need sobriety that's on fire. I need sobriety that's going to get me up in the morning and be like, who's sick and suffering today? Who's the really, really messed up on? You know, that's what I need. I love going to meetings. I'm so happy to be going back to meetings in person. I see shaking people in the streets of Manhattan, and I'm like, come to the meetings. We're going to get well. We're going to get sober. And that reminds me of what my real purpose is today. And that for me is such a gift. And I'm so happy to be with you guys today. I'm so thrilled and excited to be on this panel. I don't even know, again, what I'm doing here. I don't know what I just said. I think I'm out of time, but I want to thank the group and thank all of you. And I wish you all a blessed day. Thank you so much for my sobriety.